G'day and welcome to ReDriven. Now the Peugeot 205 GTI is regarded as one of the greatest hot hatches of all time. And now that they're pushing nearly 4 decades old, they've become quite the collector's item. But like other things that have been around for 4 decades, are these things just getting tired and grumpy? Like, are there weird sounds and smells coming from them that you just can't explain anymore? Do they just come with a whole bunch of emotional baggage? The car, I mean, not me. Look, yes, these things are celebrated globally as, one of the greatest performance cars of all time, but now that they're on the used market and just getting really old, are they worthy of those accolades, or are they actually just a small little French thing that once used to be good? So, what actually goes wrong with them? What do they like to live with on a daily basis? What do they cost to own and operate and maintain? And most importantly, should you buy one? Yeah, let's find out. Now, before we get deep into this video, I should mention that in this video, we're going to be focusing on the Australian variants of the 205 GTI. But look, if you're after information on the non-GTI 205s, or you're not watching this from Australia, don't panic, because everything we're going to be going over should cover the cars that you're interested in. Also, to keep this video as objective as we possibly could, we've reached out to various 205 GTI and Peugeot owners groups. We've spoken to 205 GTI specialist mechanics. We've trawled through what feels like hours of forums and surveys and reports on these cars. So this video is basically, it's the culmination of all of that information. Now, the 205 was released to the world back in 1983 and the GTI variants came a year later. But here in Australia, we didn't actually receive the 205 GTI until 1987. But even then, we were kind of ripped off a little bit. But look, here's me doing a voiceover explaining in more detail. See, while the 205 GTI that we received looked pretty much identical to the 205 GTIs that the rest of the world was able to enjoy, thanks to our exhaust emission laws of the time, Australian GTIs had to be detuned slightly and down-specced to be price competitive in the local market. It still had all of the brilliant handling characteristics, but it was just a little lacking in the forward propulsion department. The Australian cars pumped out 75 kilowatts while European models got to play with just over 100, and this lack of ponies under the bonnet meant that the 205 GTI was honestly just a bit of a disappointment. Luckily, there was always the sublime handling and the long list of features to compensate for the lack of power. We'll get to what these come with in a second. In terms of models, here in Australia, we received the 205 as either the GTI or an Australian and Japanese exclusive SI, but internationally, the 205 was available across a plethora of different models, which I'm now going to read out as quickly as I can. You could have XA, XAD, XAGE, XL, GL, GLD, XR, GR, XT, XS, GT, GTX, ST, DT, CTI, and the awesome Rally. Even in terms of just the GTI models, there were the limited and special editions, like the Miami Blue and Sorrento Green models, the Griff Special Edition, and the 1FM and Gentry editions. Plus, there was the 205 that was honestly one of my dream cars as a child, the incredible Group B Rally homologation 205 T16. Then in terms of midlife updates, look, aesthetically, not a whole lot changed for the exterior over its 15-year production run, short of clear indicators or a smoked rear light treatment. Even internally, there was a new dashboard design from 1988, a new door card redesign in 1990, but the most substantial update occurred in 1991, bringing power steering, air conditioning, and a welcome injection of power. Although, it wasn't that much extra power. From 1991, the engine now had 90 kilowatts and 152 newton meters, which boosted performance to a much more acceptable level. Now look, obviously we'd love to go over every specific detail of every variant and upgrade and every change with the 205 and GTI, but that would just take far too long. So instead of doing that, we have gathered all of that information and we've put it in our incredibly handy and totally free ReDriven cheat sheets. Our cheat sheets are invaluable as they provide a full breakdown of the car's model range, its common problems, what you need to look out for before handing over your hard-earned cash, how much of that cash you should be handing over, and so much more. Check it out at redriven.com or in the link below. Now guys, if you already own one of these things, or you're like a 205 and GTI expert, and you've noticed in this video that we've missed something major, please let us know in those comments. Look, we're going to do our best to cover as much as we can about this car, but yeah, if there's something really big that we've missed, please let us know in the comments. Okay, so how's the exterior? From a design aspect, I bloody love these things so much, and I'm not alone in this. The design of the 205, especially the GTI, has been celebrated since these things were released. That, for me, is like perfect car design. And like, even in saying that, like obviously as you can see, this one is a little bit, it's a bit rough around the edges. We'll get to that in a second, but I think the design excluding the paint peeling off, is actually aging really, really nicely. Like, what do you guys think? Do you like the look of it? Is it aging well? Let us know in the comments. Now, look, we'll get into like what commonly goes wrong with the exteriors in a little bit, but here's a few things to watch out for. Firstly, as you can see, the paint. It doesn't like our harsh Aussie sun at all. Like, if these things have been garaged and polished on a regular basis, the paint can look okay, but as you can see here, if it hasn't been, like, it literally just starts peeling off the car. The good news is, because this thing is so small, getting like a proper respray, it shouldn't cost a fortune. But in saying that, if you do find one that has had a respray, or you're even planning on respraying it yourself, make sure it's been done properly, because these things are becoming collector's items, and a dodgy paint job is probably worse than having something like this on it. Okay, next up, look for signs of accident damage. Like, this is a performance car, but it has no electronic aids, and they do love to lift off oversteer, which generally means they like to, embrace the scenery with much vigor. So go over the entire car and look at all the panel gaps. Do they all match? This is a bad example to show you, but like, make sure that the paint matches between all the panels, both in color and in texture. Check out all the plastics as well. Like, do the colors of these plastics match these? Like, they don't here. Yeah, just look for really bad accident damage. Now, the actual structure of these cars, they're quite resilient, but because they're so light, they can flex a bit, which results in a few rattles and creaks. We'll get to those in a second. But even though the structure is strong, the bumpers can be a little bit brittle, and also all the actual metal work, it's very, very, very thin. So, expect to see a few dings and dents from trolleys in life. Also, have a look at the condition of the wheels and tyres. Actually, while we're on the wheels, how sexy are these Speedline rims? Anyway, have a look at the condition of the tyres. If they're worn really heavily on the outside, it's a good sign that whoever owns the car or drives the car likes going around corners really, really fast. They are designed to do that, but they don't like getting abused. If the tyre tread is like all over the place as far as its wear patterns go, it could be a sign that it needs at least a wheel alignment, or it might actually have some suspension damage, and that's not good. So how's the interior? Actually, before we get to the interior, getting into the interior is amazing, because these doors, they open to like 90 degrees, so the aperture to get in is enormous. Okay, but once you're in, it screams 80s in here. It's interesting in so many ways. There's so many like geometric shapes from a design aspect, but I love it. I wish this one had the red carpet. Well, here's a photo of what the red carpet interior looks like. This has got the, the green carpet. I prefer the red. Ergonomics wise, it's kind of typical French in here. So where I'm sitting, dead ahead, but the steering wheel is actually kind of more over my left knee than in the middle. So you kind of drive like you're going to need to get a chiropractic appointment after a long drive. That's interesting. Even the sitting position, there's very little adjustment. You can adjust the seat forward and back, and you can adjust the the angle of the back there, but no steering wheel adjustment, no real height adjustment. Interesting. Now, wear and tear wise, it's interesting. First of all, if you want to adjust the angle of what the air comes out of the air vents, it's really easy to do. You just grab this here and take that out, and you just adjust the angle that you want, and then you pop it back into the dashboard like that. There are a few slightly loose plastics in here. Like, you might have to listen really carefully to hear this, but just have a listen to this and watch this. Yeah, like that's not ideal. Besides that, this passenger seat has seen better days, but have a look at the driver's seat. Now look, all of this can be repaired. These things can be retrimmed, and these plastics can be fixed up, but we need to mention that this is getting old, this car, so actually finding these parts can be a challenge, and genuine parts are getting expensive. Then there are some other cool features, like where the power window switches are, only one of them has arrows on them, because it would be a waste to put arrows on both the passenger side and the driver side power window switch. Also, if you leave the lights on, the warning chime sounds like a tiny little French police car. Isn't that cool? Also, the switchgear just feels like it's going to fall apart at any moment. It definitely doesn't feel like, say, a Toyota from the 80s or 90s. Before we get into practicality in the back seat, the way you get into the back seat is awesome, because the driver's seat becomes like a bit of a transformer. Have a look at this. Sick. Okay, now in the back seat, look, I'm coincidentally the exact same height as the width of the French national flag, as long as that flag is 188 centimeters in width. This is in my driving position, and you know what? pretty bloody comfy, to be honest. Like, for such a small car, it's quite spacious back here. My knees are only just rubbing against the back of the seat. Because the glass house is quite large, I don't feel too claustrophobic at all. Seats are comfy. It's nice back here. As far as wear and tear goes, look, you know, it's obviously an old car, could do with a proper clean, but like, yeah, a couple of little tiny rattly plastics. I don't know if you heard that, but yeah, they rattle a bit. So how's the tech? Well guys, this is like an 80s and 90s French little, you know, budget hatchback, even in hot hatch form. So tech isn't exactly the strong suit, but to make up for that, Peugeot gave it a whole bunch of extra features. Air conditioning was standard, as was central locking, fog lamps, power windows, and a 4-speaker radio cassette sound system. Unfortunately, power steering wasn't initially standard, as it seemed that the Peugeot engineers, they just couldn't work out how to include air conditioning and power steering at the same time when they did the conversion to right-hand drive, and they decided that air conditioning was far more important for the Australian climate and market. The result was a very cool cabin, but heavy steering on earlier models. For the full breakdown of which 205s get what levels of tech, just jump on ReDriven.com and check out that cheat sheet, or click on the link in the description below. Okay, so is it practical? You know what? For a car this size, like, this boot is actually quite spacious, plus the rear seats go down, giving you even more space. This is amazing for practicality in the boot. Practicality in the back seat, you actually do have kind of some little cubby holes here for bits of the car that happen to randomly fall off. Also, there's an ashtray in the back. Now look, smoking's just gross and disgusting at the best of times, but imagine smoking in a compartment this small. Are you insane? And practicality up front, you have a spot perfectly designed for your smartphone up there, which is interesting because these weren't around when the car was invented. You've got what you'd think would be a glove box, but it's actually a fused display shelf just there, which is good. You've got a spot here for, I think that's for smokers, for like an ashtray. That's just gross. Smoking's disgusting. You've got a spot down here. Now this is storage, but it doesn't open any higher than that. And I don't know how deep that goes. So if you do put anything in there, it may never come back. So that's interesting. You've got a spot down here which is perfectly sized for a Carmen's protein coconut yogurt and roasted nut bar. We're not sponsored by Carmen's, but I'll tell you what, these things are bloody delicious. There's a spot for random electronics just down here. And you've also got some interestingly sized door bins, but they don't feel like they're that securely attached to the actual door itself. But there are no cup holders in here. Come on, what's going on? No cup holders. Okay, so what goes wrong with these things? Look, we're gonna get to the mechanical stuff in a second, but let's start with the exterior. All right, first up, bloody rust. Look, Peugeot are a bit hit and miss with galvanizing these things. So depending on the year model, some of them are galvanized really well, some aren't. So yeah, go over the whole thing and look for rust. Specifically, check the rear arch to sill, check the boot floor edges, under any of the rubber seals, and also up underneath where the edges of the fuel tank and the brake lines meet, up over the tunnel seam where it gets hot. And look, as I said before, these bodies are actually, they're super lightweight and they can flex, but unfortunately in some rare cases, that can lead to cracking, like this. Now, thanks to some electronic gremlins, the headlights can just completely fail, but the problem is, even when they do work, the actual light is so crap, it kind of gives like a vague preview of light rather than actually lighting up the road ahead. And also thanks to those electronic gremlins, the power windows have a habit of just getting stuck or not working at all. Also, there are plenty of reports that the door handles can just seize and you can't actually get in the car. Now, do not, under any circumstance, buy one of these if it's had an aftermarket sunroof fitted. The factory sunroof can seal pretty well as long as the rubbers have been looked after, but if the rubbers haven't been looked after well, the whole car can turn into a leaky sieve. Okay, problems inside. First up, the gear link selectors have a habit of popping off once they're worn. The air conditioning, even like when new, it never really worked. It would be far more efficient having someone describe cold air to you rather than actually having that thing asthmatically blow onto your face. The actual seat frames have been known to break their welds and just collapse. And also the upholstery, as we can see, has a habit of like falling apart, especially these bolsters, they all start to kind of rot and collapse. And again, look, remember, all of these things, they can be fixed, but how much you want to spend on fixing one of these is completely up to you because it can get expensive. Okay, now before we get to mechanically what goes wrong with these things, I've got to ask a favor. Can you please hit the like, subscribe, and bell button if you're enjoying this video? And if you're enjoying ReDriven in general, please share ReDriven as much as you can, because the more you do of all those things, the more of this sort of car content that we can make for you, and we'd love to keep doing that. Now, mechanically, what goes wrong with the 205? Well, look, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not qualified to tell you, but Jim is.
Back in the day when these things were new, they were fun and kind of cool. But it was commonly known then that their build quality was pretty shit and the electrics were fairly crap too. So now that they're old, all bets are off in terms of what goes wrong, because everything wears out or breaks sooner or later. But having said that, if you're looking at one, that means it's one of the dozens of these things still around, and it's probably already had a small fortune spent on it just keeping it on the road. Like any car of this age, you need to have a good look at everything made of rubber, all the brake hoses and coolant hoses and all the belts and bushes. None of that stuff ages well. Have a good look at the electrics, see if anything works. Does it start? Does it run? How bad are the oil leaks and how much smoke does it blow? Look, basically, if you're buying one of these, you must be a huge fanboy or an enthusiast that loves fixing things, or both. And I just hope you know what you're getting yourself into, and good luck.
So is it safe? Really? Is this thing safe? No, of course it's not safe. Like, look at this. This is the A-pillar and my hand can go almost around the entire thing. This is not a safe car, but look, for what safety features and tech it does have, here's me doing a voiceover. No, we'll get there. Come on. No. It's kind of like playing the pokies. Will I win? Yay! Jackpot! Woo! Okay, so what's it like to drive? Well, you know, like what hasn't been said about the driving experience of the 205 GTI? So, let's take those rose-colored glasses off and focus on the negatives first. So, it is so rattly in here. Like, I don't know if you can hear the noises going on. It's at a point, like, normally I'm one to try to find where the rattle is, but in this car, it's almost like having one of those friends that every time you see them, they have like a new story or a new joke. You're kind of constantly intrigued at their new tale. This is like the same thing. There's always a new rattle. Like this morning I got in it and over there's this like a weird squealing sound. That's completely new. Just giving up in trying to listen out for the rattles because the whole thing sounds like a maraca. So the suspension in this one has recently been completely sorted, a whole bunch of new parts, and it's been lowered. But it's actually quite good. I was expecting it to be super crashy and harsh, but it's actually quite compliant. It's good. You are really aware that any impact with anything, say, larger than a small bird could end in tragedy. It doesn't make you feel safe in here at all. But everything you've read or seen or heard about how phenomenal these are to drive is completely correct. Actually, I'm going to pull over to explain this. Give me a sec. I feel like for car fans, they fall into a bit of a sliding scale. You've got those that want, 500 horsepower at least, otherwise it's just pathetic up this end. And at this end, you've got people that are all about steering nuance and like chassis balance and all those sort of things. The 205 GTI sits about there. But this thing, it's so good at driving. I find it almost impossible that even the guys at this end of the spectrum that want their 500 horsepower, they would surely fall in love with this because it's brilliant to drive. Look, overall, this thing is it's sublime to drive. I know a lot of people, they think they want a fast car. What they actually want is the feeling of going fast. And this thing feels like it's going fast all the time. I'm currently doing 70 kilometers an hour. It feels like I'm doing about 140. It's it's so good. It's phenomenal to drive. Brilliant. Love it. I forgot to mention something in the driving impressions. This thing smells like petrol like all the time. So I'm a little bit high for this last bit of the video. Sorry. Pricing here in Australia kicks off from as little as $6,000, but that will be for a non-GTI 205. But for $6,000, there's a load of other cars you should buy instead. GTIs will kick off at around about $10,000 to $15,000 for a really rough example, and the really good ones, like mint condition ones, they're asking upwards of $40,000, even $50,000. Something like this, a 91 model in interesting condition with over 230,000 Ks on the clock. Even this, you're going to be looking, maybe around 15,000 bucks. But the thing to remember is these things have a super loyal fan base and they're a very unique car. So the general consensus is that these things are a future classic. They're kind of a classic now. So getting a good one or restoring even a dodgy one, it's only going to appreciate in price. And for pricing elsewhere around the world, here's a graphic. Peugeot claimed a fuel consumption figure of anywhere between 5.2 to 9.5 litres per 100 Ks, which this car is actually claimed at. But on this test, the figure we're seeing is we don't really care, because if you're buying a GTI, we'd figure that you couldn't care less about the fuel consumption either. Peugeot offered a 2-year unlimited kilometre warranty on all 205s. And now look, I'm not that great at maths, but I'm pretty sure that equates to the fact that none of these have any factory support left on them. Servicing is recommended pretty much every time you think about even driving the thing. Like, I'm joking, but seriously, like every 12 months and 10,000 Ks at an absolute minimum. And again, like we have to say it, parts on these, they are available, but they're getting harder and harder to find, and therefore they are getting very expensive. And finally, look, if you're buying one of these or you already own one of these, make sure you join one of the owners groups. We reached out to owners groups, to research this video, and they were phenomenal in helping us out. So yeah, if you're buying one, join an owners group. Owners groups, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. Okay, so should you buy one? Look, I'm really sorry, but there's no logical reason that you should ever buy one of these.
They lack almost any sort of safety equipment, they have a pretty horrible reputation for reliability, they're becoming expensive to repair, and parts at times can be nearly impossible to find. The levels of tech are a joke. Compared to even modern base spec hatchbacks, they're slow, they're not all that practical, the constant rattling and squeaking will just drive you insane, and it feels like that rattling is genuinely shaking the car to pieces.
But look, let's be honest here, if you're genuinely in the market for a 205, especially a GTI, logic is not high on your list of priorities.
Okay, sure, it has its negatives, but this thing's immense levels of charm, personality and charisma, and just the sheer enjoyment that comes with driving it, more than make up for the long list of reasons why you shouldn't buy one.
For me, this thing encapsulates everything I love about cars. It's so raw and visceral, and like at any speed, it's just so entertaining and unique.
Of course, look, logically, you shouldn't buy a 205 GTI, but if you find the right example, preferably a post-1991 model, and you have the desire and means to keep it running at its best, just buy it. It is truly a special thing.
But remember, buying a 205, especially a GTI, it's like entering a relationship with somebody that's really, really high maintenance. Like, look, of course, it's going to be heaps of fun, but there are going to be those times where you'll wonder what the hell you've gone and done. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and look, as always, what did you think of the 205 GTI? Let us know in those comments below. And remember, can you please hit those like, subscribe and bell buttons and share ReDriven as much as you can? That'd be bloody awesome. See you next time. If you're buying one, go out to an owners group. Start again. Fucking dickhead. As always, what did you think of the 205 GTI? Please let us know in those comments below. And remember, fucking dickhead. Here we go. This is in my driving position. It's actually, kidding me, that was a good one. I feel quite, I don't know, cozy, like because the glass house is quite large, it doesn't feel too,